Yo, it's your boy Vegabomber, and welcome to Vegabomber Land. Well, I've kind of decided a couple of things. Since I haven't been to the theater here in a little bit, I decided I would do January as kind of a Star Wars month, since it's a lot of discussion going on about The Last Jedi. And then in February, what I'm going to do is make that month about Black Panther. So you can expect a whole bunch of videos as it relates to Black Panther coming out February 1st. But for now, there's still some Star Wars chat to be had. Okay, so by now we have 9 Star Wars movies if you're just counting live action movies. And so since there's 9, what I'm going to attempt to do, whether there'll be debate or argument, or maybe you say, man, you crazy, I'm going to tell you what my top 9 Star Wars films are, ranking them from worst to first. So let's get started then with number 9. So at the very bottom of my list, it probably is not much of a surprise, and probably is on many people's surprise at number 9, is Attack of the Clones. Okay, yes. Horrible love story in this deal. Stilted acting, which probably has a lot more to do with the directors than it does with the actors themselves, but still just horribly executed. And then, of course, there's this thing about sand getting everywhere and being coarse and everything. You know, our heroes split up. We got Ben Kenobi in one area, which probably that was the best part of that film, was him going and battling Jango Fett. And then, of course, the supposed love story. And essentially, Attack of the Clones was trying to copy the formula of Empire Strikes Back, because, you know, Princess Leia, Han Solo. Yeah, there's kind of a rhythm that was going on there with that. But Attack of the Clones, PU, this is straight up garbage as far as I'm concerned, especially as it relates to a Star Wars movie. Come on, Lucas. You've had better days. And number 8, probably also not a surprise, also a prequel film, and this is The Phantom Menace. And really, the only thing keeping this film from being the worst film at number 9 is 2 things. Darth Maul and the soundtrack during that fight called The Duel of Fates. John L. Williams went off with that. I mean, when you watch that scene, if you try to watch that scene without the music, it's good, but that music adds an extra, oomph to it. Like you feel it. Like you know this is serious. This fight ain't no joke right here. And then taking on a Sith, taking on 2 Jedis at once, and we hadn't seen that happen before. That was completely awesome. In fact, I just fast forward this movie just to watch that scene. Even though I'm a big Liam Neeson fan, I just don't think Qui-Gon Jinn was a very good Jedi. Maybe he should have just been on the council. But just wandering around and doing some of the things he did and some of the decisions he made, that's why it's at number 8. At number 7 is probably also not a surprise, but it's also a prequel film, and I would say it was probably the better of those because of 2 things. And that movie that I'm talking about first, let me tell you that, is Revenge of the Sith. Now, what I like about this film is I like 2 things. Number 1, I like the performance of Ewan McGregor as Ben Kenobi. Love that. And then there's Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine or Darth Sidious. I just love the way he's sitting there and he's just playing with Anakin's mind and that voice and just the dramatic range. When he's sitting there at that space opera house, whatever that is, and they're discussing back and forth who can bring someone back from the dead, whether it be a Jedi or a Sith, and him saying, "Not from a Jedi." Classic. Sends chills up my spine even now as I say it. And, of course, I did like Mace Windu, even though I don't necessarily like how he went out. But, it was still Mace Windu. It was still Samuel Jackson, who later on became Nick Fury, who also, let me just stop there. What movie is Samuel Jackson not in? But at any rate, I would say this makes it to number 7. And mainly because some people love the end of this movie, but I thought it was a bit repetitive. I thought that it went on way too long, that fight scene between them. I understand there was a lot of fate, but we already kind of knew the scene was coming, but I thought they just went way over the top with the CGI. I think it wasn't so much about where they fought. It had more to do with how they were choosing, how each strike, each stroke that they used, each parry, and each time they stabbed or went forward was just showing you how much they were committed to their point of view, though they were opposing, which having the swords clash, great way to illustrate their opposing views. And I thought that was good. But again, so much takes away from this film in that. And then there's just a bunch of the plot holes. And then, of course, There's Red Letter Media. Now, this might be the more interesting part of my section of films. These you probably can't guess. So at number 6 is, wait for it, The Last Jedi. Yes, yes. Hashtag not my Luke Skywalker. And I think Luke Skywalker or Mark Hamill was trying to tell us how he fundamentally agreed with everything on the script. Now, he had to play along because, paper, don't miss that. He's getting paid, right? But who else going to get to play Luke Skywalker? So he kind of had him over a barrel. So I felt like he was able to talk about his creative differences, which is not new. It's not that he hadn't had creative differences with George Lucas, with the original trilogy. But here, I think the many interviews you see where he talks about how he really didn't, I don't think it set well with him any more than it set well with us when we watched it. So yeah, to me, The Last Jedi, with it falling right after The Force Awakens and not really answering very many of the plot points or beats set up in The Force Awakens, that's horrible. And then, of course, there's just things that aren't explained. It almost seems like, we did this film so that we could say at the end of the day, well, that's the Force. Well, this is what the Force can do now. Well, this is the Force now. Which then says, okay, if you open up the Force to that, then that means people can do this, and this, and you can make all these different ideas of what the Force can do. And to me, if everybody just has superpowers, then you may as well just be a Marvel superhero team. You might as well be the Avengers or Defenders or X-Men or any of those. But it's not supposed to be about that. It's supposed to be a unique story about how a son redeemed a horrible father in the end. It was the son who changed the legacy of the Skywalkers from bad to good by saving his father. And so then at this point, you probably need to tell other stories. Probably don't need to deal with this one since we don't want to seem to respect the lore in this one. And I feel that. Now, was the movie a bad movie? No, I'm not going to say that at all. Did I hate the movie? No. Did it ruin my childhood? No, it didn't. Not a fun childhood. It was great because this movie wasn't out back then. No, I'm just kidding. But at any rate, no. It's okay. The Last Jedi was fine. And in fact, I found it was kind of clever, some of the things that they did. What I don't like are some of the choices, and Luke being one of them, and there are several more. And I'm not going to talk about Canto Bight because everybody has signed off on, you must hate the Canto Bight scene in Star Wars in order to say that you have an official thing you didn't like about it. Oh, come on, guys. That wasn't the worst part of that movie. There were more parts of it that were worse than that. How about the non-training? How about Space Leia flying? How about the offbeat humor that was inappropriately placed at times when you needed tension? Yeah, I don't mind humor. There was humor in the original trilogy, but it wasn't robbing the scene from its tension and intentionality and all that good stuff. And so that's why The Last Jedi, it's okay. At number 5 is The Force Awakens. Now, this was tough for me because I was trying to decide which one I felt did more damage to the whole lore as a whole anyways. And you could argue that The Force Awakens kind of started it with just saying, hey, we're going to kill off Han and we're going to introduce some characters, but then not introduce them, not talk about them much. Like Leia has a small role. Luke has no lines in The Force Awakens, and everything is just all a setup and a come on, guys. Y'all know, please tell me, you know this is a rehash of A New Hope. You see that, right? No, by now, we shouldn't have to explain the over 100 points of that movie that was a lot like A New Hope, and then, of course, The Empire Strikes Back a little bit with that snow scene and the lightsaber. Now, is it okay to do some fan service? Absolutely, and that would be okay. But when you rob too much of it from it, or borrow or take too much of it from a certain film, that, to me, is just a lack of creativity and lazy writing. There was different things you could do. For example, you had 30 years between Return of the Jedi and A Force Awakens. You mean to tell me you couldn't find a good story with 30 years to play with? Sorry, but as someone who has to write papers and write stories and put together blog posts, you have no excuse for putting up a better story than what you did. I saw why you did it, though. It was the safe route. They made a ton of money, so there you go. Now, was The Force Awakens a bad movie? Not necessarily. It was entertaining. As long as the movie's entertaining, it's probably not as bad. But the issue with it still is the characters are hollow. I don't really care about any of the new characters. There's no reason for me to. And then, of course, man, how you play the old characters out like that? And again, I'm okay. They have to die at some point. But when you hand off the baton, make sure it's a smooth exchange when you hand off the baton to the new people who are going to run with it from there. That's all I'm saying. So Force Awakens, yeah, at number 5. And at number 4 is Rogue One. Now, this is interesting. Now, this is easy for me to put this here over The Force Awakens because going into Rogue One, I already knew the story, knew what to expect to a big degree, and was pleasantly surprised with that last minute of that movie. But even the battle scenes, even before that, were well imagined, and also I thought were creatively shot, and the cinematography was certainly beautiful. But, you know, again, with these movies, cinematography should be good because it's mostly relying on that, right? But I would say it's here, and it's good. Now, the only thing I did not like about Rogue One is, once again, the character development here was just very thin. At the end of the day, I don't remember most of the names. I don't care. I remember K2SO, and in fact, I liked his arc the best in the movie. In fact, I liked it much better than Jyn Erso's. But at the end of the day, did it do what it needed to do and then boot up well to what would become or what would be A New Hope after? Yes. If you watch Rogue One and then put in A New Hope right after this, it's seamless. The continuity is there. And so for that, I got to say Rogue One, to me, is going to be over Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And wasn't Darth Vader cool? Can't you just always watch that scene? In fact, that scene in Rogue One is like me watching that scene in The Phantom Menace. And you know what scene I'm talking about, Darth Maul and the two Jedis. It's the same thing, except for we got more in The Phantom Menace. If we got maybe a little bit more in Rogue One of Darth Vader, that'd have been pretty awesome. So, right there, Rogue One, number 4. And the top 3. Now, here's where this may not be as big of a surprise, but at number 3, I have Return of the Jedi. And let me tell you this. I used to really not like this movie as much because of the Ewoks. They were such a disappointment, and I could see there was the turn to go towards heavy marketing towards toys. If you remember correctly, in the 80s, the big toy that everybody wanted around that time the movie came out were the Gremlin dolls. They were nice and puffy, the little creatures, so you could see where George Lucas would shrink the Wookiees down and make them teddy bears, since already the Gremlins were doing so well with toy sales. So that was something that I really held against the film and still do to this day, because really beating the Empire with rocks and sticks when they got armor and guns, which are long-range weapons, which means, well, you know where I'm going with that. But with all that said, with Return of the Jedi, what I love is right when you thought you had a good twist in Empire Strikes Back, Luke find out that that's his dad. Here's another twist, and I might even argue it's just as good, if not better, and that is Luke decides to go and turn his father. Now, nowhere in the old trilogy do we see anything anything that Darth Vader does that seems even remotely friendly or positive or nice to anyone. Yet Luke still saw something that we never get to see in the old trilogy, and that was enough for him to risk his life. He didn't know what his dad was going to do. He didn't know he'd save him for the Emperor, but he did it anyway. And that's my Luke Skywalker. And I'll say, that's pretty big. Now, sure, there's some plot holes and some cheesiness when Luke goes to save Han Solo, but for the most part, if you really look at the turning points and the messages and what Luke was willing to do, it was pretty amazing. And also that talk between him and Ben Kenobi about that point of view thing, and then Yoda having his last breath in this film as well. It's good stuff, man. Good stuff. And number 2 is Star Wars, because that's what it was called first before it was called Episode 4, and then A New Hope was added to it, right? It was just Star Wars. And for me, this was the film that set it off. In 1977, I was 9 years old. I'm showing my age, I guess. But I enjoyed that world. I completely was able to forget everything that was going on and just go there and go into the land of fantasy. But as it turns out, as I watch it as an adult, I can still watch the film. And it's not as cringy as watching some other films that didn't age as well. Like, E.T. didn't age as well to me. But this Star Wars story, I can watch over and over and over again, about a farm boy, about a princess, about a scoundrel who has a big pet, walking furball for a pet, and then some droids. I can watch it over and over again, and the themes still play out. The universal themes were well hit upon by George Lucas. Does it have its problems? Sure. Not as many, or not enough to make you not really enjoy A New Hope, unless, of course, you think it needs to be cut, it needs to be faster and quicker. But it wasn't made in 2016, 2017, 2018. It was made 1977. And there's something about being there and knowing that helps you remember why this is good. So now, you know what number 1 is. Number 1, all time for me, for Star Wars films, and I don't see this changing anytime soon, The Empire Strikes Back. What did I love about this film? I love the fact that it didn't even follow the beats of the first film. It kept the lore, but it didn't follow, and then it expanded upon it, and it did it well. I love the fact that the good guys don't win all the time, and they don't win in this one. In fact, Han Solo gets frozen into carbonite. Luke gets his hand cut off and finds out that his dad, is Darth Vader, the one man that Ben Kenobi was telling him was the worst man in the galaxy that needed to be taken down. So, how do you not want to sit back and watch that? And then, of course, just the creativity. This is the first time we see the AT-ATs and just the different, the different site of just an ice planet there on Hoth. I love that it was different. It wasn't just, sand again, the theme of sand. It was something different. And then, of course, the introduction to Yoda, to which we learned some of our biggest lessons back then. When Yoda says things like, hey, do or do not, there is no try. That's not, hey, life is full of failure. Failure is your best teacher. This is more. This is motivational. This is more about what do you do when things don't go well. So trying doesn't work. It's either you do or you do not. And then when your attitude's blown, when Luke says, you want the impossible, and that is why you fail, right? So these are huge messages that are universal that anybody could get to. And some might say kind of obvious, but it wasn't because of the way that it was shown. You got to see Luke failing in this. And you could understand his frustration. You could see how lost he was. I mean, he doesn't know his dad. He doesn't know his mother. He hasn't found out yet that his dad is actually Darth Vader. So he's a troubled person. And he's trying, though. He at least showed up. He tried. He went to Dagobah, right? And then he gets the best mentor session ever. That still gets quoted even in corporate businesses today. They still quote Yoda. That's pretty impactful. And that's what the second film in Star Wars did. Yeah, The Empire Strikes Back, always a home run. Anyway, this is your boy Vegabomber, and I'm out. You!